This is Tanya Pearson interviewing Zia McCabe on May 22nd, 2019 in Portland, Oregon for the Women of Rock Oral History Project. Thank you so much for participating.
You are so welcome.
Love the Dandy Warhols.
Thank you.
Told you, big fan. And like I told you before we started, we kind of start at the beginning and like work our way up to present day. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a log cabin in Battleground, Washington, about 45 minutes north of here. My dad built it when I was 3. Like, we lived in a little one-room kind of shack behind the shop while he built the log cabin. And my sister was born shortly after we moved into the log house. He still lives there. That's where I grew up and went to Battleground High School.
What did your parents do for work?
My dad started out doing auto body, and he got quite sick from the paint, had aplastic anemia when I was little. He survived. And then he switched and became an engineer working for the State Highway Department, which he retired from recently. He's a maker, a builder, an engineer. He can, build and fix anything, basically. And I was always really impressed by that. And then my mom, she stayed at home with us. She has some serious issues with authority, so she's not super employable. She's an artist. She went back to college after my parents divorced when I was about, I think, 20. And she went down and went to U of O at the same time as my sister. And they both studied art. My sister is a painter and has 4 kids and owns a coffee shop. Became a lesbian after the 4th child was born. And now has a trans partner, so she's run the gamut. And my mom is a fiber artist. She does some watercolor and stuff, but mostly it's basket weaving and screen printing on fabrics, a lot of upcycling. And they both live at the coast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So you just have the one sister? It's the 2 of you?
Mm-hmm, one younger sister.
What kind of kid were you when you were really young? Were you like introverted, extroverted?
My mom describes me as like the wonder baby. Everyone loved me and wanted to play with me, and I never cried. I was always happy. Really, really affectionate and cuddly. My aunt called me Barnacle. I just never wanted to stop hugging and cuddling and playing. My memories are of being just content, just pretty cool with my place in the world. And that's something that, for the most part, has stayed with me. Life threatens that kind of attitude from every direction, but I think I've held on to a good part of it.
That's funny, because I read in an interview that all of you said you're like well-adjusted musicians and artists, like maybe the only well-adjusted.
Yeah, that's when we realized all of our parents were still married. Yeah. And my parents are the only parents that split up. But Courtney's like, oh my God, we must be the most well-adjusted band in America. And he's a huge fan of hyperbole, and that's kind of the way that he speaks. But in just the spectrum of artists and how well-adjusted artists are, I mean, typically your art is your redeeming quality, right? It's your thing that makes you okay in the world. So a not well-adjusted artist is way more common than a well-adjusted artist. And I think typically the well-adjusted artists are more the technician style of artist that hone a craft and have their piece that they give to the world, but it's not out of the kind of pain and suffering that the starving artists and the artists that use their art to redeem them. And there's kind of those 2 different types. And we, I think, fall somewhere in the middle.
When did you first become interested in music, or who were some of your first like musical influences?
Music for me started via dance. So, and my parents' really killer record collection. So those were my 2 avenues to music, was hearing. My dad built these beautiful, warm 70s speakers, and we listened to, Willie Nelson on Sunday morning, and my mom would play Fleetwood Mac while we were buffing the wood floors, or there was music in the house. And then there was this woman who came from the East Coast, went to Juilliard, was a dance instructor, was a dancer, and blew out her knee. And really, her only ability to keep dance in her life was to teach children. And for whatever reason, she ended up in Battleground, Washington, and had a little studio built. And we were part of All That Dance, ATD. I still have the T-shirt somewhere. And we did routines to Cyndi Lauper and the Eurythmics, and I loved it so much. It was my favorite thing. But we didn't have a lot of money, and once it was time for me to kind of go to the older age group meant going into Vancouver and going to much more expensive dance lessons, much more, not a suite, more like there's really serious parents and serious students, and I'm kind of like, I want it to be fun. And if you miss a class, you still have to pay for it, and it's a 30-minute drive each way, and so it just, my mom's like, I'm just so not into this. So I didn't get to keep going. And then that was it. I mean, I wanted to play drums in the 6th grade, and they wouldn't let me, not my parents, the class. And so I was given a clarinet, which I love clarinet music now. Love it. It's some of my favorite jazz music. But I hated it then. I resented it. I was the next to the last chair the entire time. I remember challenging on Twinkle Twinkle and being like, I didn't practice. This is humiliating. And that was it for music. I did a little bit of choir. And then I started college. I studied welding, which I did in high school too, welding, auto, and quite enjoyed those vocations. I assumed I would probably end up doing sculpture is where I thought I was headed in college. I was getting my foundational welding classes out of the way, studying nutrition, and took a couple of Christmas gigs. At the Vancouver Mall, I worked at the Sam Goody and at the Starbucks for the Christmas season. And one of the guys that I was working with, this guy named Kirk, he was in a band. And at the time, right, it's grunge. That's just really all there was. I mean, there was Cherry Poppin' Daddies and Sky Cries Marys. There was a little bit of other things to see, but mostly it was grunge. And I so badly wanted to be seeing live music and going to dance parties, but it was grunge and house and techno, which I really am not a fan of either. And it was just so disappointing to see this live music and not have it be anything like the music that I loved growing up, which would be like 60s and 70s psychedelic music. But I still went. I still loved it for the sake of being there, the energy of a live show. And this guy, Kirk, was talking about being in one of these bands. And that just, wait, you're in one? You, who works with me at Starbucks, is in one of these bands. Like, you go on the stage and play an instrument and give all that energy and vibe that I am so interested in. And he's like, yeah. So I said, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. I want to do that too. And he laughed and said, that's not how it works. You have to play an instrument. And I said, well, you don't know. I am a master manifester. I was raised New Age, and that is how it works. I just say it, and then I get to let the universe bring it to me. And so he, whatever he did after this holiday job, I don't know, but I went back to Clark College. And 5 months, I think it was around May, some kid, there's no cell phones, right? Some kid hands me a wadded up piece of paper on campus and says, I don't know, this guy is looking for another band member. And I'm just going, how on earth? And I was getting ready to get in a band in the college. I was like, was trying to find some other way to do this. I was still, I was starting to be more open to this idea at that point. It's Courtney's phone number. So I call Courtney, and he asks, have you been in a band? No. Do you play any instruments? No. but you want to be in a band. And I was like, yep. I think that sounds really cool. Oh, and I was taking beginning guitar. So here's me like kind of starting to clear this path towards being on stage. And I got a C. I didn't get that. Kind of like, I didn't do that well. I still can't tune a guitar without a tuner. And he, before what led Kirk is friends with Courtney, and that's how the number happened. He was talking with Kirk. He'd broke up with his girlfriend who was playing the synth bass in the band for the couple of months before me. And it didn't go super well, and the relationship ended. And he tried out a few bass guitar players and basically said they had bad habits. He just didn't like the way they thought music. And like I said, it was all grunge, and that's not what Courtney was interested in doing. He was kind of lamenting to Kirk and saying, oh, I just, I want another female. She doesn't even have to know what she's doing. If she could just learn these parts to these 4-chord songs and do a drone, it'd be fine. She just has to have, some character, right? Someone with personality that's malleable. And Kirk was just like, I know who that is. That girl was right. She knew what she was doing. And so I met Courtney at another Starbucks. So thank you, Starbucks, for playing such a huge role in my future. The one on 21st and Lovejoy right over here. And I remember like following the directions in my mind to get over to Portland and how you find the Starbucks. And Courtney was a fascinating person, of course, right off the bat. He had his pegged state press striped pants and his Beatle boots and his broad shoulders and cheekbones. And, his look was very dialed and mine was very not. I had like manic panic red hair and tank top, no bra, camouflage pants, fake Birkenstocks. I mean, it was just like, I get now why I got hit on by women so much in college, but I didn't then. Now I look at pictures and go, oh, That's why. But he didn't seem to mind. And I didn't really understand most of what he was talking about. I don't remember any of it, but other than me just going, okay, cool. I really had no interesting responses. But he took me back to the basement where they rehearse right up the street here on Raleigh. So this is like Dandy Central, this part of Northwest Portland. And he showed me like, that's A, that's E. When my hand moves, move your hand. And that's like the beginning of it. And I had good rhythm from dance. I was able to recognize, basic chords from the guitar class. So I had just like literally the minimal amount you could bring to the table to be in a band that already has written songs and has done shows. And that's how we started. I drew the keyboard on a piece of paper, brought it with me to see the Grateful Dead, and practiced in my tent to a cassette tape. Came back, and my first show was at the Laurel Thirst Bar. I think that's over on Stark. I'd never been in a bar. I just turned 19. Courtney and Peter were like 25, 27. So there was this huge gap. There was a cultural gap. There's a gender difference. There's experience difference. The music they knew, the style they had, all of it was just, I've never felt more like a hillbilly than I did around these guys. I did ask Courtney, I don't know how long after, years, I'm sure, maybe around a year. I was like, why, seeing your style and what you guys know and what you're into, why on earth would you let me be in your band? And it's just like, you weren't scared. You just showed no fear. You weren't.
Were you scared? Inside?
No. After I met him, I went back to Vancouver to my little basement apartment that, $100 a month, my first place I'd ever rented, and thought about what it would mean to agree to this. Like, what's at stake? What am I going to gain? What am I going to lose? And I felt what I perceived was that Courtney wanted that thing that made me feel okay in the world. That thing I was born with, my gift I was given, at birth to carry me through life, that I was starting to realize not that many people have that particular gift. And I felt like that was going to be challenged, that Courtney saw that as valuable, that was a little bit of a commodity for me, but also maybe something that would be threatened. And I also perceived it as a once-in-a-lifetime chance. And I wondered, how at risk is that thing that makes me feel okay? Like, if it gets taken away, can I get it back? How damaged am I going to feel without it? These kind of things. And it's come close to slipping through my fingers a few times in this industry and in this band. I certainly don't regret my decision at all in any respect. But I did have that kind of foresight of like, this will be the challenge, is hanging on to your security, your comfort, your place in the world, in trade for just the wildest adventures that anyone could dream of. And I was like, hey, let's do it. I'm gonna do this. And yeah, that's how it started.
So once you decided to join the band, did you drop out of college, or what were your expectations for yourself and like for your future?
Yeah, I left college instantly. It was the end of that year. I mean, I maybe half considered going. Well, you see where it goes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're 18, so 3 months is still forever. So you just kind of see where it goes for the summer. So Peter's parents were out of town. They live up in the West Hills. They have a solar heated pool and a wine cellar. And so we just went on this wonderful, exciting, I think 6 weeks of just playing music all the time, playing shows, going back to Pete's parents, having huge parties, everyone naked in the pool. I mean, I just couldn't believe what was going on, and having the time of my life. And then the shows just kept coming. And then now we're going to go to San Francisco. I'm like, we're gonna play outside of our city. Like, we've made it. And each increment was, and that's all I need. Like, we sold out La Luna. Well, my life is complete. And every step, we're gonna go on a van tour around the US following 11 Rockets. I think was maybe our first tour. My life is complete. And it just was this wonderful feeling of every single thing that happened was in not such rapid succession that you couldn't enjoy it, but spread out just perfectly to where if life ended right there, you've made it. You've made it further than you imagined. And we were always one step beyond what I could imagine. And that's a pretty exciting way to live, because it's like, it's just Christmas every day. And then, now we're flying somewhere. And my 20th birthday was our first trip, my first time in an airplane, right? My first time in a hotel where they try to turn down your bed. I thought they were talking about a thermostat. Like, these are the things that were happening to me. Was the world was opening up at the same time as the band was finding success. So the sense of wonder was just like nonstop. And then my 21st birthday was our first trip to London. And I wish I had written these down. I don't have very many regrets, but every New Year's I would lay back and list it. Fuck off, bug. Lay back and list all the things that I did for the first time that year. Why didn't I write that down? Because the list was so long every time. There's no way I know now. But each time it was like 20, 30. And now, of course, that list has diminished greatly. But it was so fun. That was my New Year's ritual. What were all of the first things you did? And the people you met and the places I saw. Really amazing first few years.
Can you talk a little bit about what the music scene was like in Portland when you guys started out, and how did you fit into that?
I feel like, well, the music scene, like I said, was grunge bands. It was a lot of angst. It was a lot of, I'm mad at my parents. I'm mad at whoever. I'm going to yell over 3 chords. Not a lot of attention being paid to beauty, right? And sensuality. And we came on the scene as these hedonists that missed lounge culture. I was too young to miss lounge culture, but in theory, I wanted velvet and candles, not cement and knee scabs or whatever the grunge scene was doing. So there was that, and so we were this relief to what was going on, which is what the Dandies have always done. We've always been this, I'm not getting this from the musicians around me. I guess I'm gonna have to do it myself. And that's why we've always been a bit of a square peg in a round hole as far as how radio could treat us, where we fit in on festival bills is we were always this kind of this other thing that wasn't really happening at the time. If everyone's doing guitars, we make a keyboard record, or vice versa. Keyboard record, that sounded lame. Synth album. But there were some other cool things going on, just more in the smaller scenes. And of course, there was the Riot Girl movement was peaking. I never super fit into that scene. I wasn't, especially once I got in the Dandy Warhols, I didn't feel included in that. I felt excluded specifically in that scene, unfortunately.
Did you try to include yourself in it? Or?
Well, when I was going to see music, of course, I loved it, but I would bring my boyfriend, which is already like a little bit of a point against you. But I felt like I was probably dating feminists. I mean, they wanted to go to the shows. It seems like it'd be fine. And I think that my way of dealing with the way a woman fits into things was just being more of a dude. And I was looking back on it now, quite sexist in my own way, right? And that's a way that a lot of women get through being in a man's world, is just being kind of misogynistic themselves. Yeah. And so in my naive way of coping, I wasn't embracing the movement that they were pushing. And so it makes sense that I wasn't totally included. I didn't really get it. So yeah. I wasn't against any of it, but I didn't really grasp some of the concepts.
And, oh yeah, I've always been curious about this, the band dynamics and how much each of you contributed to the songwriting process, the recording process.
It was Peter and Courtney started the band together and wrote together. And I think then it shifted more towards Courtney bringing in these chords and this melody and lyrics, and then everything being built up around that. And for me, I mean, I had no idea what was going on. I played my root note and had good rhythm, and they were just happy to get me through my parts real fast. And then they would sit around and do 12 hours of guitar takes, which was so boring. I mean, oh my God, it was so boring. I just didn't get it. I didn't have any... If your ears aren't trained to things, or your eye isn't trained to things, it doesn't touch you in a way that if you understand it intimately. And so it all just sort of washed over me. I couldn't tell the one guitar take from the other. I mean, which is asking a lot, really, of anyone to be able to decipher somebody's, 100 guitar takes. So they spent hours on it, and they would be kind of butthurt that I didn't want to sit around all day at the studio. I'm like, you guys, my parts took like 5 minutes. That's not fair. So that was some of the early dynamics. And then, of course, over the years, it shifted. I was exposed to studio time with Massive Attack. And it completely opened up my world to the variety of synthesizers and the different ways to apply them to our music. And really, just if you guys leave me alone for 5 minutes, I can come up with something cool. I just hadn't been left alone yet in music. I was completely sheltered. And so once I started insisting on that space, I started to write. And, first it starts with writing parts for the Dandies. And then eventually down the road, it turned into writing songs for my country band. And then that has led back into me bringing a song on the last record to the Dandy Warhols. And that's pretty neat that over the course of 25 years, you just eventually absorb musicianship and become a musician, even if I didn't really put I wasn't driven to become what I've become. It was just a very organic process via exposure and necessity. And this song needs this. How do I fulfill this thing that I see as a gap in the music, as something that's not being expressed that would tell this story more completely? And so through that necessity, I became a musician. Not because everybody around me was a musician, I felt like I should figure it out real quick. I didn't ever specifically figure anything out. I just sort of grew some parts along the way, and like looking back on it, eventually I'm like, oh, I'm a musician. How did that happen? And so now, to answer your question, that's kind of what's happened to all of us. And they have much more solid musical backgrounds, but now the contribution to the songwriting is more coming from all directions for the band, which I think is pretty exciting.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about, so your first record was released independent label, and then you were on Capitol Records, major label, for 4 records, and then back to independent. If you could just talk a bit about your experience on an independent label versus major label, and sort of your like trajectory to success.
Sure. I mean, so much of like what I do now in the band versus what I did then, as far as on the administrative and running a business side, is night and day. So back then, I really had no idea what was going on. Blissfully ignorant to what was going on that side of it. But of course, being on the independent label was like a 4-page contract, and it was just very fun and free and easy. And like I said, we made it. We're on a label. This was another benchmark of like break and die happy. And we put out our album exactly the way we wanted to, and recorded to tape. By the way, we have been for the full span of technology of recording, and the Thor, Lindsay from Tim Kerr Records, got this bidding war going. And it was one of, the kind of the dying days of that major label scene. And he got them just so riled up that they had to have us. And we milked that time period and the trips to New York and the tickets to the, music awards and all these crazy expensive dinners, and we just took full advantage of this. We were already, hedonistic in our cute little thrift store version of that, and now we were going like full on hedonism and all the free records and all the free CDs and everything we could get, and finally settled on Capitol Records. Perry Watts Russell's just such a cool dude, and he's who talked us into signing, and the Capitol Tower is so cool looking, and it was different. There was just so many employees, and there's this whole building. And I remember my take on it was, these guys are working for a ton of bands, right? And they've got a roster, and they're making calls, especially like college radio, are making these phone calls for all these bands. And there's no way they're all getting treated totally equal. If you look down and go, oh, those guys are dicks. I'm going to skip them on the list today. Or, oh my God, Zia was so fun last night. I want to do extra nice things for her. I care about her. So my thing was forging these relationships with these people so that there was a real person that you were working for, not a band on a list. And that was my contribution. That's what I felt like I could make a difference in. So I'd show up in my roller skates and blowing bubbles and, bikini and like making friends with everybody. And it was so fun. And I felt like it worked. I felt like we were extending our community to these major label people who maybe don't always feel in community with the musicians that they work with. Unfortunately, every album was a completely different staff. And so everyone was just gone. And I'm like, where's all the friends I made? And it's just all different people. And do I have to do this again? Well, it doesn't feel as genuine now. Now I'm like glad handing, right? To get these people to remember me. And it lost its authenticity. And I lost the steam of starting over. By the third time, I just didn't care. And I could tell that they didn't really either. We'd already been, had a couple albums out. We didn't blow up the way that they thought we were going to. And we were defiant. We were very much like, you guys don't know what's cool. You don't know what we're doing as artists. You don't 100% get us. So why don't you just let us make our art? You put the product out. Stop trying to interfere. You guys are kind of lame. And of course, they were completely offended, and it's their money, and they have a say. And that kind of clash isn't a great way to support what could be a collaborative effort. And we never really hammered out the details. If you do this, we do that. And every time we did, it was that much less support happening in that building, right? And maybe to the level of even sabotage in some ways, right? Because we just had really done such an excellent job of offending these guys by not letting them tell us what to do and not respecting their opinion or their authority or whatever they perceived. And so the budgets would get smaller. We didn't want to shoot a video in LA and throw away all the props. We want to shoot a video up here and pay for the interior decorating of our new studio. And so they would give us a fourth of what they would give a band to shoot a video. The cool thing is because they kept whittling down our budgets for everything to kind of throttle our ability to do what we want to do, meant that when we left the major label, we didn't owe them any money, which is like unheard of. They actually owed us because we said, look, you don't want to work with us. Just let us go. Don't take the next option for an album. Nobody's having any fun. And they're like, no, we're doing it. President changed and said, we don't want you. Ugh, get out. And so we're like, and we will take that budget with us, thank you, and walk with $250,000 to set up our new, not really the business skills to do that in a savvy way, but we were still on our own. It's kind of like when your parents have been giving you a big allowance and all of a sudden you have your own things to take care of, and that money isn't going to keep coming anymore. It goes real fast. But that's how then we switched over to the independent labels, was with money to get started, thanks to capital. And we kept doing things exactly how we wanted to do it. And kept not really totally fitting in the music industry. Kept alienating people by not, valuing their opinions. But really, always through and through, we've done stuff how we wanted to do it. And that's not something a lot of bands that reached our level of success can say they were able to hang on to.
Yeah, I think you're the first person that I've talked to who's on a major label and doesn't owe a major label money.
It's unheard of.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I felt like almost a bit of a coup that we pulled that off.
In those days, were you able to make a living just doing Dandy Warhols, or did you have other jobs?
Yes and yes. I've always had a side hustle, but that's my personality more even than specific income needs. Is I needed to have a thing that I was managing on my own. Like, in order to keep my identity. Like, who am I? Am I only the Dandy Warhols? Will people still like me outside of my being the Dandy Warhols, will people still respect me? Am I still capable of making decisions on my own? Those were things that were really important to me to keep intact. So I had like my cigarette girl business, and I had this cute little tray and would go to rock shows and like sell cigarettes and candy. And that was kind of one of the younger one. I was cigarette girl of the year. There's always, I'm trying to think of some of the other things that I've done over the years, which I mean, now ultimately, real estate. And at this point, it's hard to tell which is the side hustle between rock and roll and real estate. So yes, I've always had those kind of DJing has always been a really good side hustle for me. But yeah, we were on salary for a long time. Once we got on salary, we stayed on salary. That has its pluses and minuses. I actually would recommend against it for any band. I would say it makes you complacent. I would say that you stop paying attention to the in and out of the money outside of your paycheck because your shit's covered. So you just assume that the world around it is kind of staying the same, the income and the flow, and that people are handling your money without wasting it, without losing it, and so while we were able to not be a cliche leaving the major label, we did still ultimately end up being totally a cliche with our accountants. Once I started looking into the business side of things because, we were starting to run out of money and our salaries were being threatened. So all of a sudden you start paying attention because your bills aren't going to get paid. And I wasn't really getting answers from the accountants that I wanted. And they were acting really dodgy and like offended that I wanted to know this information. And I'm like, that can't be right. That's our money. You have to show me where it is whenever I ask. I'm pretty sure that's the law. And they quit. And I'm like, do you know how bad that makes you look? They not only quit, and this is at a time where like we're managing that shift of money just coming in from everywhere to not just coming in from everywhere. And that's a part of success, especially as artists, that you kind of have to face, that it doesn't last forever. And so I was trying to steer this in, manage this phase of our career in a way that we weren't caught by surprise, in a way that we weren't all of a sudden out of money and everybody has to scramble. I wanted to be in front of that. And because we had been so mismanaged by our accountants at the time, we weren't in front of it at all. Our taxes hadn't been paid in 4 years. That's the worst example. We owed money everywhere. And I'm looking at this going, oh my God, we're such a cliche. Our accountants mismanaged our money and we're in debt all over the place. This is what I've been trying to avoid our whole career, is not be the cliche and the pitfalls of these other bands. And I think really, truly, had we not been on salary, we would have known sooner that shit wasn't right. And so if there's any advice moments in this interview, I would say don't get on a salary. It's too easy to stop paying attention to what's going on with your business.
And those are accountants that worked for the label, or were they like
They
separate?
were for us.
Oh, for you?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're not like you said, the only major label band that left being where the label owed us money. Bands letting accountants run their stuff and they're on salary, this is where it ends. This is what happens. Why does it matter to the accountants what they pay first? They don't understand what our priorities are. They don't negotiate on our behalf to pay somebody less so that we can pay somebody else. So every band should have one band member that oversees, at least one band member. So now not one thing gets paid without me knowing about it. And that has ultimately put the ship right for this phase of our career where we're not on salary anymore. We are still making a living. We still get to be artists and musicians, but in this much more mindful way. And if that's what it takes, I'm happy to do it. I think back on it and go, man, could I have made us so much more money if I'd been doing this the whole time? Absolutely. Is this the way I wanted to participate in a rock and roll band? Absolutely not. So I want to have fun and get drunk and be the kid in a rock and roll lifestyle that I did. And so I wouldn't trade it for anything. But if I knew now, I would have had to do it this way, you know. So I'm glad it worked out the way it's working. I got to have my total, you know, blissful ignorance for 20 years, 2 decades of just running around being in a band, taking shit for granted left and right, but having so much fun. And so much fun I can't remember it all, of course. And now in my 40s, I can be a shrewd businesswoman and help us, you know, survive for however many more years and be a grown-up about it. So.
Did you take this job upon yourself? Or was it like, you just like started doing it?
We all have our different strengths, right? And you probably heard me talking to one of our crew guys earlier, that the breakdown is now like Peter takes care of the gear, and sort of the administrative stuff of our carnets, so we can get our stuff shipped around the world, getting gear repaired. That's Pete's domain. That's where he excels and knows the stuff, has the relationships with the repair people. You know, he's that guy. Courtney does a lot of the interfacing with the label and the booking agents. And that's, you know, his domain. And we all check in with each other, and it's all actually quite diplomatic. And then I take care of the accounting and the merch. And so, and Brent, you know, gets
I know, I'm like, what about the drummer?
Yeah, well, another wonderful cliche. Brent is awesome, and he has a great spirit, and he's fun, and he's lovely, and he lives in Australia. So that's just the long and short of that. He's a drummer and he lives in Australia.
Yeah, that makes sense then.
And he's a lovely human. But it's, you know, it's divided up actually quite well. We all do a ton of kind of thankless work and try to remember to thank each other for it. And that's, you know, what it's like to be a musician in your 40s.
What was your purpose or goal in opening up where we are sitting right now, the auditorium? That was 2010?
No. No, it's more like 2002, 2003. The way we've always done our recording is build a studio. The first album we did not. We, you know, kind of worked at 3 a.m. in studios so we could get them for cheap or free. And then the next album we did in a friend's studio that was very much just this bohemian, cool space with vintage gear everywhere. And his space was so vibey and cool and looked like our apartments, you know, except with more gear and a bigger, you know, recording desk. And so then the third opportunity to record, which now we're on a major label, right? So we've got some budget. We got an old men's bathhouse. It was over Washington. Anyway, it's the Pearl now, but or downtown Pearl-ish. I think it's a PNCA building now. But it was an old men's bathhouse, so there was like a cedar steam room, which is like a golden spot for warm recording sounds. And then the echoey tile bathroom. And so we just set up, we brought the studio in there. There was one office-y thing that became the control room, and gear everywhere, freezing cold. It was so cold in there. We would turn on this massive, like, propane heating wind turbine sounding thing, get it to where your fingers worked, and then turn it off and record and do that over and over. We had some wild parties, but it gives you that luxury of time, that by the hour, they both have their benefits. The by the hour makes you be more focused. You come in with your stuff ready and you work. And so for the first album, everyone's first album is already written and rehearsed, right? Because you do that before you have a chance to make an album. Later, you are writing kind of in the studio and you want that time to kind of explore these songs. They're a little less developed the further you go, or for us anyway, that's how it's been. And so that time affords that like stony creative pace, right? And try this, and try this. Well, let's have a party and do some more later. And so it makes the process a little more convoluted, but it is our style. That's how we work. And so we need to have our own space. Then, 13 Tales did quite well. Courtney did quite well on the publishing side of things. And so he wanted to own a space rather than rent a building and put a studio in it. And in my mind, I was picturing like an old gas station or something because the spaces we'd been in weren't that big. And when I walked in here, it's like, holy cow. This is a quarter of a city block. It's an old machine shop. And like I said, we started using our video budgets to do all the interiors rather than make throwaway sets. Made sense. Even if it was a fourth of the budget, you can still buy a bunch of cool shit. And it just became everything. There's a Seamless, there's a green psych, so we can do videos. Where the wine bar is now used to be a bank of offices. So we had our management in-house with an assistant in-house. There's a room back here where all the merch business all the merch was shipped out of. We have the industrial kitchen and dining room so that we could have, David Bowie over for dinner, which we have done, and the Strokes, and so many cool bands have come here and played music and feasted, and we can, and of course, rehearse and make our albums. So it became our clubhouse that we can do everything, every aspect to be in a band we can do out of this building. And that was the dream. And we're still living it.
We're sitting in the dream. Necklace David Bowie and finger tattoo David Bowie?
They are.
Okay.
They
David
sure
Bowie
are.
came
Yeah,
to
this was a
dinner.
gift. This is Let's Dance.
Oh.
That a friend makes. He makes these. And then Peter and I, every once in a while, will get a tattoo together. We have 3 over the 25 years that we've gotten together. And so he has one on his, too. Yeah. There are our friendship tats.
Miss David Bowie every day.
Yeah. Well, I'll show you the chair that he sat in.
Yeah, please. I'm going to touch
it.
I'm going to touch it.
You can sit in it and take a picture.
I'm going to sit in it. I want to talk. You have a daughter. When did you have a daughter? When all this was happening?
Yeah. Right? How does that work? Yeah. It wasn't easy. There was a couple of pregnancies that came at bad times, and one before I married Travis, and one after. And I was like, I can't do this yet. I can't do this right now. There's just too much going on, and I am just beyond fertile. So I'd had 2 abortions from a previous partner, not from unprotected sex, just from, I just will find a way to get pregnant.
That's why we love these new laws, huh?
Oh, yeah, I'm not threatened, right?
Yeah.
Matilda was protesting yesterday. My daughter was down there with her boots on the ground. So it got to a point where I was like, okay. And Travis worked for the band, so he was on the road with us. So the plan was the trajectory, which to that point had not done anything but this, or even like that, we would have 2 buses. We would have a family bus, right? That did not ever happen. But I was like, okay, if I get pregnant, I can get pregnant in February. That will give me, I can tour pregnant up until like 7 months and finish recording the album. Was that Earth 2? I think it was Earth to the Dandy Warhols. It might have been Auditorium or Warlords of Mars. I'd have to go back and listen to which songs go to which. And then have the baby and then go out and promote that album. So whichever one came out in 2004.
Well, Auditorium 2000, I thought that was 2005.
Okay, so that was probably...
Yeah.
No.
And then 2008.
Was Earth 2?
Yeah.
So it had to have been Auditorium or Warlords of Mars. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe it took us forever to mix it. I don't know. I literally finished recording it. So everyone's like, you can't do that. You can't just pick February. And I'm like, oh yeah, watch this. Just put some sperms in there. I'll be pregnant. And that's what happened. I mean, we like tried, it was like 2 days before Valentine's and 2 days after. And so if it was a boy or a girl, we would know which one was the one. I'm pretty sure it was the first try. And so I toured, quite pregnant. I was also just massively pregnant, just a big girl pregnant. And so we did the tours, and I came home. I finished my last track, I think, 2 weeks before Matilda was born. I was sitting here going, oh, okay, I think I'm done recording. I'm done doing anything. Had her 6 weeks after I had her, are the photos for that. I remember being like, I am not ready to be doing promo photos. I still have like 100 pounds to lose. So I have coveralls on and I'm holding a welding helmet. I just went like, okay, I'm just going like this. This is how I'll have to look. And then we took a road trip down the coast and did all of these beautiful photo shoots. I mean, I have like the nicest tits in these pictures. Every time I look at them, I'm just like, look at those milk jugs in these photos. I was always just kind of putting them forward to kind of hide the parts that I didn't feel as fun being big. And brought her with us. And that was her first trip, was that she was just a few months old. And maybe 6 months we did that trip. And then I remember having to sit down with the band going, well, we don't have 2 buses. I do now have a child. I don't know how we're going to do this. We have to confront this new reality. And we kept bringing Matilda until she started school. Travis kept working for us until she started school. Once in a while, we would have the help of a nanny, like a friend who was willing to just have rent paid for. I wasn't in the kind of financial position of the luxury of a nanny. I would have her from when I woke up until sound check, and then until the show. I would do a shot of tequila, walk on stage, play the show, walk back off stage, have Tildy. Travis would take her on the days off, and I would just be dead. And because he worked all day. I mean, he was the stage manager. He was the first one in the venue and the last one out. So he didn't have a lot of opportunity to give me, a break. We would usually hire a babysitter just for the little bits of time. And it was wonderful and exhausting. I don't know how we lived through those first couple of years. I would have 1 or 2 days per tour where I would just get sloshed drunk. If there was a day off the next day, it'd be my one night to just like completely blow off steam and then just lay there regretting it. But the necessary cycle. And Travis would take her and I'd sleep it off and she would have some formula, which we had to bring because milk doesn't stay in those fridges. So if I wanted to drink or there was no saving milk. So I could only, have the milk that I could give her if I didn't drink or if I was just there with her. So she had formula part of the time, which was weird. And then the baby food, and there'd be broken baby food jars on the butt. It was just crazy. It was I don't know how, people are like, I don't know how you did it. And I'm like, me neither. I do not know how we did it. But we did. And seeing her toddle around the festivals with her little, A, B, C, D shirts on, or a little Rolling Stone, or little punk rock T-shirts, was worth every bit of fatigue and frustration. And I love when I see someone else kind of making their way through that.
There are actually a lot. I feel like these stories are like the kind of unspoken stories like in rock history because no one ever asked them. But it's like
how was your baby? How did you do that?
How was touring with your infant?
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't imagine. And also if we had a nanny, she was in our room. I didn't have the money for an extra hotel room. I mean, so when you have a kid, any extra money is just gone. Whatever time and money you thought you had are gone. So that meant no private time for me and my husband. So days off meant either I was sleeping off a hangover or we were in a big fight because it was our only chance to like have a disagreement because you have to like be professional the whole rest of the time. So we'd like get all of our disagreements out. So days off were just this bogus. I mean, he had fun. He got to take Tildy around and that was probably really cute. But then there would just be the nanny in the room with us like, awkward. Like there's no privacy. So that I imagine would be, and that still would be incredibly difficult. But having a separate room where the nanny could be and even the baby could be once in a while, that is a treat I did not experience.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your. I read this quote. You said you're still learning about your strengths as an activist and a spokesperson. That you started kind of speaking out or doing kind of like activist work around the time that you started your job as, I can't think, what do you do?
Realtor.
Realtor.
Oh, no,
I just had
it's
a brain
way
fart.
before that. Okay, so my very first times participating in political movements were in high school. And of course, there was just like the peace marches and the environment and some of those basic ones. And then the first time I was on the news was the No on 9, which was gay rights. And so I remember speaking out, about gays are people too. I have braces. Like,
because you're the lesbian spokesperson.
Yeah,
so.
right. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I did not know that. I didn't know why I was always having to tell people I wasn't gay. I was so confused. I had short hair and everything. It was just, I have a picture of it that just cracks me up every time I look at it. And so I did that, and it felt good, It felt good to animals' rights. Animals' rights was where my activism started. And then it moved to, world peace and gay rights. And then when I got in the band, I got the distinct impression that that's not what we were doing. It was never like decreed that we are not activists or that we will not have politics in our music, but it definitely didn't seem like it. And I was along for the ride. That was the commitment I'd made to myself in that basement. I was like, let's just go do what they're doing and get on board with this and experience it all the way. Don't try to change the course of it. Of course, me being me just inevitably influences, like everyone, we have a ripple around us, right? And some of us a splash. And so we did some cool things just because they were gigs we got asked to do. And they were definitely, I can't remember the name of the event, but it was certainly to do with gay rights. I mean, we showed up in drag and we did a lot of cool stuff. I mean, being in drag is really fun and cool anyway, so that's an easy thing to be, supporting at these fundraisers and shows. But we didn't specifically have a political voice as a band. And so the part of me that feels more complete when I'm standing up for somebody or something or a cause went dormant for quite a while, besides my, World Wildlife Fund donations once a year, or, public radio, until the Clean Water campaign, when they were trying to fluoridate the water in Portland. And I was just so offended by the notion of medicating a water supply. I thought that was just so, to me, that's a no-brainer. I didn't think that was a divisive issue. I'm like, yeah, but there's fish in the water. I mean, there's fluoridating water seems so weird to me. I had no idea how common it was. I just knew we didn't have it. And then learning more about the sensitive population, part of our population that can't have that water, that seemed weird too, that they weren't being taken into consideration. It seemed weird to systemically treat teeth. Like all of this just seemed so weird to me. And also, you get to say no to any treatment that a doctor recommends. You can say, no thanks, I don't want chemo. No thanks, I don't want any interventions. And this was an intervention without consent. To me, it seemed like the very bottom of this argument. And so I set to work. I showed up with the group of people getting together to organize this campaign and said, I'm Zia. I play in this band that, maybe there's a platform here I can use a little bit to make my word go further. What do I do? Tell me what to do. And I spent 9 months without a drink. I didn't have time for any kind of partying. I couldn't even bear the thought of losing a day of work to a hangover. And I just set to work doing every single thing I could. I organized a festival. I organized a series of 8 shows, concerts, a Sunday concert series of every different kind of music to expose people to this cause. I did a march of 1,000 people up Alberta with cops at either end and marching bands and baton throwers and everyone in blue and big salmon floating above us on sticks and this whole glorious movement. And we won it. And I felt so incredibly important, and I felt like I had really tested myself of what are you made of? How tired can you get and still be creative? And how motivated can you stay when it doesn't seem like you're making a difference? These are all things I hadn't really put myself to the test of, and I was living pretty easy in the rock and roll lifestyle. And after that, I felt like I absolutely have a responsibility to use the small platform that I do have by being a musician and somebody that people respect what I have to say. So maybe I don't always need to just talk about music and I guess maybe some fashion, Maybe I can talk about these things that we're struggling with as humans on this planet that we're, trying so hard to kill our ability to live with each other and to inhabit this earth. And the band was supportive of they showed up and played my festivals and were part of the march and so now we contribute in the ways that we can. Every Christmas show that we do at the Crystal, $1 from each ticket goes to some organization. Like last year was SMERC, and so it went to New Avenues for Youth, which supports trans youth and homeless youth. And I felt like our $1,200 check would actually be significant to them. And I did the opening speech for Bernie Sanders. 26,000 people. I spoke my truth of why I thought this guy should be president. I've certainly never endorsed a candidate. Endorsing a human versus a cause, I think, is way murkier of a decision. But I really am behind all the same things that Bernie is behind. And I felt like when they asked me to do it, I was so fucking flattered. I was like, who else is out of town right now that I got? How far down the list did you go before you got to my name? Because it's 24 hours before the speech, so you must have tried a few people. But I took it really seriously and I nailed it. It's online. It's good. I'm very proud of it.
I read about it. I have to look it up.
It was
now.
pretty
I didn't
good.
watch it,
I mean, people cried. It was awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I try to not miss an opportunity to stand up for the people and the plants and the animals that need people standing up for them. And also to work outside of yourself is such a valuable part of being a complete human. Is if you're really only working on yourself and your immediate people, you're really missing out on that sense of community and that feeling of self-worth that you gain when you did something for somebody else that you don't know, but needs your help. That's a really important part of life. And so to come back around to that and realize how much I was missing it and to embrace it and to bring the band with me through some of that has been another part of being a grown-up rocker, right?
Oh yeah, and I wanted to know how did you decide to become a realtor?
Well, when I started realizing I needed to start to manage the way that our career played out in this, third act. I don't know where are we. Yeah,
You're not that old.
right. But for musician, as the age of the band, though, to be doing something for 25 years as an artist and making a living off of it, I would kind of call it the third act. It is different than that. The sky's the limit part of a career, and just like humans, we shouldn't see that third act as this like you're gonna die sad
Swan song.
Yeah. I mean, Jane Fonda has a great speech about the third act. It's awesome, and that's kind of what makes me comfortable using that term and not being like, they're sad and old. No, man, we're alive and we're embracing the reality of the arc of a career, mixed in with the arc of our own lives. And when I was seeing that I'm going to have to not only accept this, but I'm going to have to help nurture the egos around me while we accept this together, I'm also going to have to figure out how else I'm going to make money. Because at some point, this isn't going to pay all of the bills. I've been so lucky that it has for so long. Let's be realistic, right? And so I was being realistic. What are your skills? I don't want to go back to school now. The amount of I can't. I'm still being a musician. This isn't a stop-start thing. This is what out there can crossfade. I didn't feel like I'm a 100% musician through and through, and that's all I ever wanted to do with my life. I want music to be in my life in some respect forever, so I have a country band. I can play country music with some country musicians forever and ever at little honky-tonks wherever I end up living. It's going to be fine. I can sing Patsy Cline songs mixed in with a few that I wrote and find contentment in that. I don't have to be a rock star. So I knew that about me. I will always miss it if it ever does end, I will, of course, miss it. But what can dovetail with that and bring an income where I can support my lifestyle, my overhead of my home and my daughter and my mother who is soon to be a dependent, and there's pressure there, right, to earn or incredibly downsize your life, which I wasn't in the mood for. And I thought, well, you're good at math, you're good with people, you have a huge network, right? I'm pretty sure these people respect me as competent. So it just kind of boiled down after thinking about it for maybe a year or two. I was like, I bet it's real estate. I bet I would be good at that. I know this town, and I know the people in this town, and I think I'm pretty on par with the way it's developing around me. I get what's going on. And I'm a good hustler, I'm good with creative solutions. I'm good with different kinds of personalities. I'm good with figuring stuff out down to the wire, not falling apart. These are all things good real estate agents need to be able to do. And so I just waited till I thought, okay, we're going to be transitioning out of these salaries. This will be a good time. And so I went to school, the online on tour. Ugh, talk about boring. That was the boringest thing I have ever done in my life. It is grueling. Got through it. Spent a year building my business while I was touring. And the sales started to come in and touring kept happening. And I close deals while I'm on the road. I start deals while I'm on the road. I negotiate repairs while I'm on the road. And it's not always my favorite thing I want to do when I wake up. I just want to wake up and be a lazy rocker and only have to think about music. That is a luxury that I don't have anymore. And it is a luxury that I had for longer than most people have. So I'm not crying about it. Maybe like 2 times. Yeah. Life is so hard. But I'm really blessed to still just get to be me. And I mean, my business card is like hilariously cute. There's still with a little bit of tattoos still. Yeah. And the bobbed hair and the cropped bangs. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm trustworthy. It's pretty funny. But the people who ask me to do it are the people who don't want to work with a square, and they want to work with someone that like will go get stoned with them and look at houses and know that when it's time to make a deal, they're not gonna fuck it up. And I have proven that with every transaction. I'm not gonna fuck it up. I'm gonna work really hard, and I'm gonna go above and beyond, and I'm gonna have a sense of pride in this work that I'm doing. Plus, I'm hooking people up. Like I'm making their shit smooth for them when it's a super scary time it's the biggest purchase of most people's lives. So many things can go wrong. You're making decisions about stuff that you don't know anything about. And I get to like facilitate some ease and grace and joy in what can be a terrifying and kind of septic, sterile situation. And that fits my rock and roll lifestyle. It works.
Oh, did you want to talk about your new band at all? Is that something that like interests you in this interview or no?
Let's see. What would I have to say about? I mean, we could just talk about side projects in general.
Okay, yeah, side projects, yeah.
It never crossed my mind to do a side project. I thought it was so wild that I was playing music in the Dandy Warhols because I didn't consider myself a musician. That playing with any other musicians was just like, it was already an anomaly that I was playing music, right? And then somebody drove by. I was in my friend's front yard in Division, which, boy, he sold that house for a lot. It's a fancy neighborhood now. And someone yelled out the window like, I heard you have a side project, or when is your side project playing? And I was like, what are you talking about, side project? And I thought about it in my head, like, what if I played with other musicians? God, that would be so weird. And years later, I mean, I might have goofed around with some musicians here and there. I really wanted to sing. I just thought it was so fun, but didn't know how. So I wasn't particularly good at it. And so I went to this night called Karaoke from Hell. And it's a live band. And you get to sing songs. The Wipers, the Cranberries, they have like 500 songs you can sing. And they'll like kind of sing along with you if you get lost. So it's this great live karaoke thing. And I was just like, oh my God, I was so nervous. I learned Patsy Cline, Walking After Midnight. And my voice is so twangy, there's no getting out of it. So it's country or nothing. Or sing other songs and make them sound country. I can't help it. So I practiced it. I practiced it to the karaoke version. I did this it was my birthday. All these friends are there. And I got up there and was just like, I go on walking after midnight. And like got through the whole song and then was elated. I lived, right? You feel like you're going to die before you do these scary things. And oh my God, I loved it so much. It was so fun. I learned another song every week, another country song. And I would DJ their little 30-minute break. And somebody invited me and Kirk, the guy who plays guitar in Karaoke from Hell, to do the songs that I do at a party. And so we did, Preacher's Son, Walking After Midnight, Ode to Billy Joe, like these country classics. And it was so fun. Zia and Kirk were just doing these country songs, no big deal. And it became enough of a thing. We just kept getting booked. I didn't set out to make a side project. It just kind of happened from wanting to sing and do this other expression of music so badly. And then I was like, well, I guess it's kind of a band. Maybe we should it was Zia and Kirk. And then this girl started doing harmonies with us. So it was Zia and Kirk and Krista. And I'm like, oh my God, this is stupid. I need a band name. And so I was born in Bush Prairie, Washington. You asked where I was from, and I said Battleground. Well, for 2 weeks, I was in Bush Prairie. And I was born in a farmhouse. And so I was like, that's easy. Bush Prairie. It's actually kind of hard to say. So we're Bush Prairie and Brush Fire and Black Prairie. And then, of course, Black Prairie came out, and everything was black, and everything was prairie for a minute. And But that was the name. And I was like, well, if I have a country band as a name, I guess I should like write a song. And so then I wrote a few. I've still only written a couple of handfuls of songs. I'm not prolific at all. I don't think I live in the dark place that music comes from often enough. I'm like, so that puts me more on like the technician side when I referenced earlier that deep creative out of necessity because life is so hard and confusing and painful. And then there's the person that's like, I'm happy and like to make music and it's fun. I'm more towards that side. So I don't have that. I have a trickle of what some people have a quite heavy flow of creative necessity. But I did it, and my songs fit in with these vintage classics, and that right there just was so rewarding for people to be like, I didn't know that one song after that Willie Nelson song. I was like, that's because I wrote it. And so that went along, and I still do Bush Prairies. I've learned so much being outside of having a side project when you've never been outside of one project is a whole other world of things that you did not know about music. I did not understand hearing hearing different people play the same song, how wildly different that could be. I just didn't realize it's an acoustic guitar. It's two hands. There's rhythm and chord changes that are already predetermined. Why does it sound so different? And it's wildly different. Some people I wanted to play with and some people I didn't because I didn't like how it sounded. I just wasn't exposed to that variety, and then the decisions that have to come based on the variety that you experience outside of just the personality of the person. And so putting this band together, and then if anyone left, I felt devastated. Like, it must be me. Why am I doing this? I'm not that good. There's a million country bands. Your voice isn't that great. The world doesn't need another country band. And that's the thoughts you go through. And then people would be like, I want to play with you. Let's put the band back together. And then they would do it. And I'd be like, there must be something special about me. I have this band again, and I'm just probably so great. And then they leave, and I'd be like, I'm a nobody. And I would just go through until I realized that that's what country bands do. They have a revolving door of musicians. And what I learned was this incredible flexibility that I didn't have before. I was quite a rigid musician. It goes this way, and it sounds like this when I'm next to these other musicians, and that's all I knew. And now I was starting to learn how to bend and flow with these different personalities and musical styles, and it broadened my ability to work inside of songs. And that goes back and reflects on being in the Dandy Warhols. And so everything that I learned in these side projects makes me a better Dandy Warhol. And I didn't know how much I needed that to stretch outside of this one definition of music. And so then now beyond that, there's this female project. We don't have a name. But it's with this woman, May Arden, and Louise, I don't know her last name. I should know that. Woodward, maybe. She's a viola player through psychedelic pedals, Crybaby, Delay. And May is an opera singer who wants to sing folk songs and shit with her operatic voice. And then me doing my bass underneath with some kick drum and some, a tambourine on my foot. And it's this crazy combination of musicians. And I'm working with some really fucking talented, extremely skilled, trained musicians. And I feel like such a hack. It's another time to challenge myself and be like, oh, you're not good at this. You don't know what you're doing. And then to have them say things like, oh my gosh, it's so refreshing to work with you. Because you don't have these rules and these these ideas of how music is supposed to be. You actually don't even know how it's supposed to be. That's so fun for us. I'm like, okay, feel good. I can do this, and do it well. In my own little Zia version of music, I have something to contribute to these two super talented women, and it's flattering and rewarding and challenging, and also neat to be working with two chicks. It's pretty fun. I've never done that.
So I just have, before I do I ask everybody the same 4 questions at the end of every interview. As someone who started off, like, kind of fell into music and being a musician, what was because it sounds like being a musician is like a part of your identity at this point. When did you reach the point where you thought, I am a musician?
I have reached that point 1,000 times. I kind of the way that I had described every benchmark as like, oh, now we can die happy. There would be this new thing I did. I wrote a bass line rather than playing a drone of the root note of the 3-chord change. I wrote a bass line. That is like, well, that's what a musician does. All right. And then there's another, I influenced the song in some other way. And so there's these incrementally is the answer, right? But over and over. But to say it out loud to other people really did take me a long time. I felt like a bit of a fake, like a bit of a, yeah, technically I'm in a band, so you're going to see. I felt like people took for granted that I was more of a musician than I was. And that made me feel a little bit fraudulent. I really value honesty, and I really value that you know what you're looking at, and I didn't want to pretend I was more than I was, but at the same time, you can't constantly be cutting yourself down to try to get closer to what you perceive the truth is. And so letting people perceive me as, it's hard now, like people call me a multi-instrumentalist or that I play everything. I'm like, well, yeah, sort of. I can make some cool sounds happen on anything besides like if it needs like amateur, then I can't do it. But I could, well, I probably can't on a violin. But there's a lot of instruments out there where I could just make something happen. And that's the kind of musician I am, right? But to still have no training, to not know any scales, there's a whole world of musicians that I don't feel like I fit in well with. Part of why this female project is so special for me, because I am fitting in with the people that I saw as the others in the world of musicians, right? So it's a work in progress, my identity as a musician, because the way you define a musician is so subjective. But I think pretty well across the board at this point, you'd have to say I'm a musician. I'm almost more comfortable saying I'm an artist. Right? And music falls under the umbrella of art. And that is a little bit more where I feel safe to describe myself.
I wonder why that is, though.
I don't know.
I know what I think.
Well, also part of it is the influences on videos and artwork and what the show looks like from the stage. All of that is being an artist. Mm-hmm. So the music is the biggest percentage of what I do. That leaves out all the other things I do. So I could say I'm a musician and an artist, but at that point you're like, shut up. So I would just rather say I'm an artist that mostly plays music.
Yeah.
That feels a little more accurate to me.
Okay. Last 4. How do you feel about your role in and contribution to rock history as a whole?
The band?
You in the band. Yeah. I guess also the band.
I mean, the band thing's too hard to answer. I hear enough bands out there that I can hear a clear derivative of us, that I know we are a branch in the big oak tree of rock. There is a branch that's us, and other branches have come off of it. I know that for a fact. I see the evidence in the music around me. For me, I think that some of the biggest influences, especially the more people that hear my story, is the show upness. The you showed no fear. No matter how underqualified you think you are, try it anyway. What's stopping you? Failing? Boo. Like, maybe Courtney didn't choose me, then maybe I would have gotten that band in my college and gone that way, and who knows what would have happened. But show up, because the couple of times I've scared myself out of showing up, I've regretted it. And I've luckily had second and third chances to show up for the thing that I kind of wimped out of. I think life's too short to not show up for things. And I think that when girls specifically hear that I didn't know any instrument, that I didn't play any instruments, and that this is what I got from it, that doesn't mean that every person that wants to be in a band that doesn't play an instrument. I understand that I in some ways won the rock and roll lottery. But still buy the ticket, right? You might win the rock and roll lottery. So that, and just in life, it doesn't have to be music. That show up thing, that there isn't this bar that's set of how much you have to know or experience before you qualify. I think there's that. I think there's that I didn't try to embody any sort of persona, that I, took my shirt off at shows. Not because I was trying to be a feminist, not because I was trying to be a dude, not because I was trying to make us more noticed, but just because I was having such a stinking good time. That I completely embraced the joy of life, of being alive, and taking every opportunity to have fun and experience everything. I feel like that comes through on stage. I feel like that's a takeaway when people see a show of ours or have an interaction with me. What else for influencing rock and roll? Yeah, I think it's the be yourself thing. I think you can learn as you go, and I think as long as you keep being yourself, it's pretty hard to get lost.
And what are your thoughts on the visibility of women in rock history in general? Is there a gender discrepancy? Is it not an issue at all? Or has it changed for better or worse since you started playing?
Well, my first idol was Janis Joplin. That's her tattoo. I didn't do the math on how many females were musicians. I listened to Janis Joplin and I listened to Juice Newton, when I was a kid. Yeah, she's maybe not a rock star, but in my mind, there was another female in the sort of tapestry of musicians that I liked. And there was Cyndi Lauper and Madonna and Annie Lennox, and I didn't know that the ratio was skewed. So for me, that didn't keep me from getting into music. I didn't think I'm a girl. I just didn't think that way. Anyway, I just didn't. That's probably why I didn't end up in any kind of riot girl movement, because I just didn't notice the difference. And once there was a perceived difference, I already was so indoctrinated into surviving it by just being a dude that I didn't participate in a lot of that female-male math. But unfortunately, I think I'm the minority in that way of thinking. And I think that there are a lot of girls who see that it's mostly guys and feel like there isn't a space for them. And I think that, yes, that is changing. And I think, of course, the Patti Smiths. There's only one Patti Smith, but you know what I mean. And the Bikini Kills are making a difference. And the fucking Beyoncés. And there's only one Beyonce, but we're all the people in the Beyonce umbrella absolutely are out there and bringing it and setting good examples, and females feel more encouraged. I think it's very clear that it's not that women weren't in rock because women couldn't rock. I think in all aspects of careers, women didn't see the examples, so they didn't think that that was a possibility. That's too bad. And I don't think that that's really the case anymore. I sure hope it's not. I mean, I know it's not for my daughter. She absolutely believes she can do anything. And if there's any girls out there that are wondering if they qualify, they certainly it's certainly not if you're a woman, whether you qualify or not. That's not why we make decisions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think this is just an interesting question to ask in this kind of like post-gender time where the name of this project and this collection is gendered. How do you feel about the category women of rock or women in rock, women who rock? Is it helpful or hurtful, necessary or unnecessary? Would it be more productive at this point to just kind of do away with the categorizations?
Well, I think we're certainly at the tail end of it. That has always bothered me. Like I said, other people pointed out to me, it's because you're a girl. Like, why aren't my ideas being heard in this band to this engineer? I feel like he's ignoring me because, yeah, it's because you're a girl. That guy's super sexist. I'm like, what? That's so lame. I didn't know it. And at that point, kind of refused to let that be part of my narrative because I'm a girl. I don't participate in that narrative. And I think it's benefited me in a lot of ways because you're basically acknowledging it if you say it. And I love that we're in the wonderful world of spectrums right now, that everything is a spectrum. The moment I realized I'm on the spectrum, I am not girly, girl side. You know, just like there's super dude bro over here. Most people are, I'm not in the middle. I'm not, totally gender neutral, but I'm kind of a dude. And I've always liked that about me. And however we define dude, not dude. But I like that I like to dress like a man. I like to lead a female partner in dance. I like to be the muscle in a situation, these kind of masculine traits. And to realize I was on the spectrum of this was so cool because I was spending so much time acknowledging other people, and the people who really had the heaviest weight to carry are the people right down the middle. They're the ones that really struggle, really were left out of this binary, because the closer you get here, the more you can kind of squeeze into the binary definition. And so I was spending so much time acknowledging the struggle for these people. But to see that I'm kind of on here somewhere, that I'm actually part of this whole picture was really kind of enlightening, right? And I think it just so much goes away once we have a spectrum of these things, of sexual preferences and sexual identities. And so yes, ultimately, women of rock, fuck that. But because we still need strong examples, just to make sure that anybody wondering if they have a right to seek to fulfill their desires to make music or art or be Supreme Court judges, those stories need to keep being told for a little while longer, just to make sure everybody knows. Just in case you were wondering, here's all the wonderful examples of the women that did things in spite of, the societal norms, the ones that pushed up against those, the things they were told they can't do. Those stories need to be told. Do they need to be retold and retold and retold? I fucking hope not. Like, just come on. Can everybody just do what they want to do? And the more spectrum definitions we have, I think that, we get closer to that. And the more that these stories are out there where it becomes, without a doubt, that you don't have to say you can or can't do something because you're a girl. So we're close.
Yeah. That's kind of my goal, too.
Yeah.
Just, saturate the media with, women's stories.
Yeah, get it out there.
Okay, last question is, what are you most proud of personally and or professionally?
It's hard to not be, it would be hard to be prouder of anything than, raising a cool human, right? Matilda is so cool. She was out, marching for women's rights yesterday, marching out hand in hand with her teachers 2 weeks before that, marching against ICE before that. She's 5'8", she's beautiful, she's smart, she's articulate, she's feisty, she's compassionate, she's cuddly. I'm the most proud of her, hands down. And then professionally, and then there's that little activism part. That Bernie speech was a pretty big deal. Doing the clean water thing in the Bernie speech, I have this whole separate category of pride for. With the band, within the band, I mean, there are so many parts that I'm incredibly proud of, God, that is so hard to define. What would be the thing I'm most proud of? I think that I just never stopped growing and learning and becoming an influence and a good role model, even specifically for my bandmates. This is how we be a band. This is how we run a business. This is how we keep enjoying life. This is how we keep making music. Like, making sure that all of that we're all okay, right? It's hard to be an artist. It's hard to be a human. And to be a sensitive human is even harder. And to help these guys stay in this together, pretty proud.
Okay, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked, or anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't include?
We talked about a lot. I mean,
I was telling Sophia on the way over here how, like, incredible it is that you have been a band for as long as you have, with pretty much the same members, except for,
well, and Eric still does shows with us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that you still, like, get along and speak to each other, like, are in the same. It's
and that
sort
doesn't
of
mean that
unheard
we
of.
don't not get along,
Yeah.
right? But I work really, really hard to not take shit, but to also smooth it over when there is shit, and just navigating the choppy waters. It is hard on the ego to come to terms with a career arc where we have been and ever shall be the Dandy Warhols. We're not going to break up. At some point, people are going to wonder how long it's been since they made a record, but we're still recording. Touring is hard. We do it less, and that's part of the managing this. That's part of the, let's not run ourselves into the ground. Let's make sure we have time for our family. Let's make sure we have time to develop other aspects of us before it's too late. Let's do enough shows, the right amount of shows, to where we still get to enjoy playing together, but don't do it so much that we're completely burned out and hate it. And striking that balance is what's preserving the relationships and the joy of music, rather than trying to wring every last bit of career out of it. I want to play music. I want to enjoy this thing that I have access to, that I am so privileged to be part of. I don't want that to go away. It can change and shift. It can take up less space in my life. We can deprioritize it and not be this thing that consumes us. But I still want to have it be this treasure that we get to keep sharing, right? And I think we're managing that. That's what it seems like we're doing. I feel like we're successful in this endeavor, in this new chapter. If it's not the third act, then whatever fucking act it is.
Well, thank you so much. This was great. I appreciate you sitting down with us.
You're welcome.